The smell of antiseptic and that particular kind of institutional warmth, the kind that comes from too many bodies in too small a space, was still on my skin when my husband told me to take the bus home. Not a taxi, not an Uber, the bus. I had just spent 4 days in a hospital bed after a C-section. My stitches pulled every time I shifted my weight. My daughter, 7 pounds and 2 ounces of the most perfect thing I had ever seen, was bundled in a striped hospital blanket in my arms. And my husband was standing in the discharge bay, car keys in hand. My car keys to my car, the one my father had given me as a gift 2 years before our wedding, telling me that he had a family dinner to get to. The 92 stops right at the corner, he said. Like that settled it. Like I hadn't just had a human being cut out of my body 96 hours ago. I looked at him for a long moment. I looked at the keys in his hand. I looked at the car, the silver Mercedes S-Class parked in the visitor lot, the one I had chosen myself, the one with my name on the registration, and I thought about all the things I could say. I didn't say any of them. Okay, I said instead. He nodded, already distracted, already texting someone. He kissed me on the forehead, or near it, somewhere in that general area, and walked to the car. I stood at the discharge bay doors with my daughter and a paper bag of prescriptions and a hospital-grade maxi pad situation that I will not describe in further detail, and I watched him pull out of the lot. And then I called my father. To understand why that phone call mattered, you have to understand who my father is. Most people in Vancouver know his name. Even if they don't know, it's connected to me. If you've driven over the Granville Bridge, you've probably passed a building with Aldridge Group on the side. If you've eaten at a hotel downtown, or stayed at a resort in Whistler, or attended a gala at the convention center, there's a reasonable chance my family had something to do with it. My father, I'll call him Dad, because that's what he is to me, even when the rest of the world calls him Mr. Aldridge, built his company from a single property management firm in North Vancouver into one of the largest private hospitality and real estate groups in British Columbia. I grew up in a house in West Vancouver with a view of the inlet and a housekeeper named Agatha who made the best butter tarts I have ever tasted in my life. I went to private school. I summered, the verb, on the Sunshine Coast. I had every advantage a person can have, and I was acutely, sometimes uncomfortably, aware of it. Which is exactly why, when I finished my commerce degree at UBC and moved into the city on my own, I told my father I wanted to do it myself. Not entirely myself. I am not going to pretend I paid for my own apartment with nothing. He gave me the car. He topped up my TFSA. He was and is a generous man. But the job, the life, the relationships, those were mine to build. I worked as a junior analyst at a mid-size investment firm in Yallowtown. I went to the farmers market on Saturdays. I took the SkyTrain like everyone else. I did not, as a general rule, tell people who my father was. Not because I was ashamed, but because the moment people know, something shifts. Suddenly, everything you say is evaluated differently. Suddenly, people are very interested in being your friend, in being close to you, in staying in your good books. I had watched it happen to my older brother his entire adult life, and I wanted something different for myself. So when I met my husband, at a work event through a mutual colleague, nothing fancy. I was just a woman in her late 20s with a good job and a nice car, and an easy smile. He worked in sales for a construction supply company. He was charming in a comfortable, uncomplicated way. He made me laugh. He remembered things I told him. We dated for 2 years, moved in together, got engaged. When I introduced him to my family, I told him we were comfortable. That my father was in real estate. That the house in West Van was a family home we'd had for a long time. He nodded and didn't ask too many questions, and I appreciated that about him. Or I thought I did. We got married on a Saturday in September, a small ceremony at a vineyard in the Okanagan. My father paid for it. My husband knew my father had paid for it, but he thought that was, I don't know, a nice gesture from a successful man, not evidence of anything particular. He drove the Mercedes to our honeymoon dinner without asking. I let him. I thought it was sweet that he liked the car. I should have paid more attention to how much he liked the car. The first 2 years of our marriage were fine. I mean that in the way you mean it when fine is the most accurate word available, not a deflection. We were fine. We had a routine. We had a condo in Kitsilano that he found and I paid for. We had friends we saw on weekends. We went to Tofino for long weekends and he loved it, and so did I. There were things that bothered me. The way he talked about money. Not having enough, wanting more, measuring himself against people he worked with. The way his mother, when she came to visit, would run her fingers along the countertops and comment on the neighborhood. The way he accepted my car as a kind of shared resource without ever really acknowledging that it was mine. But I told myself these were small things. Everyone has small things. When I got pregnant, he was happy. Genuinely happy. I have to be fair about that. He came to every appointment. He built the crib himself from an IKEA box, which took most of a Sunday and some colorful language, and I loved him for it. We picked a name together. We talked about the future. What I didn't know, and didn't find out until I was in my third trimester, was that he had also been talking to a woman he'd met at a work conference in Calgary. Talking and other things. I found out by accident. A notification on his laptop, which I opened because I thought it was mine, which it wasn't. The kind of notification that, once you've seen it, you cannot unsee. I didn't confront him immediately. I know that sounds strange. But I was 34 weeks pregnant, and I sat with that knowledge for 2 weeks before I said anything, turning it over in my mind, trying to figure out what it meant for the baby coming, for the life we had built. When I finally brought it up, calmly, on a Tuesday evening over pasta, he denied it. Then he minimized it. Then he said it was complicated, that I hadn't been present in the marriage, that the pregnancy had made things difficult. He used the phrase emotional distance 3 times. I counted. He did not apologize. Not that night, not the next day. He said we would get through it together. He seemed to believe this was sufficient. I went into labor 2 weeks later, and there wasn't time for anything else. He was in the delivery room. I'll give him that. He held my hand during the parts that mattered, and he cried when our daughter arrived. And for a moment, an hour, maybe a whole afternoon, I let myself believe that this would change things, that she would change things. She didn't change things. By day 3 in the hospital, he was visibly restless. He checked his phone constantly. He had to pop out for things: coffee, a call, fresh air. His mother and sister came to visit and stayed for 2 hours and talked mostly to each other. His sister held my daughter for 20 minutes and spent 15 of those taking photos for her Instagram. On the morning of day 4, my husband mentioned that his parents were having a dinner on Friday. A family thing. His uncle was in town from Calgary. Great, I said. I was nursing my daughter and concentrating on that, which is an activity that demands more of you than anyone tells you beforehand. It's at Hawksworth, he said. I knew Hawksworth, downtown valet parking. That sounds nice, I said. Yeah, he paused. I was thinking I'd take the Benz. I looked up. I'll need the car seat base transferred, I said. We'll need to figure out how we're both getting there. He didn't say anything for a moment. Well, he said, I thought you're being discharged tomorrow. You're probably going to be tired. Maybe you'd rather just go home and rest. I understood what he was saying. I wanted him to say it plainly. Are you suggesting I don't come to the dinner? I'm suggesting you might be more comfortable at home. With a 4-day-old baby. Exactly. And how would I get home from the hospital? He'd looked at his phone before he answered. Scrolling, not even looking at me. The 22 goes right past the hospital, he said. Or the 99, there's a stop on Broadway. That was the moment. Right there. Not the thing in his laptop, not the calls to Calgary. This was the moment I knew exactly who I was dealing with. I had just had a C-section. My daughter was 4 days old. He wanted to take my car to a restaurant while I took public transit home from the hospital with a newborn. I thought about telling him who my father was. Right then, I thought about watching his face change. Instead, I said, okay, and I waited for him to leave, and then I called my father. My dad picked up on the second ring. He always picks up on the second ring. I have a theory that he lets it ring once to compose himself, because he is a man who values composure, and then he answers. I don't know if that's true. It just feels true. Hey, sweetheart, he said, and I burst into tears. Not delicate cinematic tears, the ugly kind. The postpartum, sleep-deprived, stitches pulling, betrayed by my husband kind. I sat in that hospital bed and I cried in a way I hadn't let myself cry in weeks, maybe months. And my father listened without interrupting, which is one of his great gifts. When I got through the worst of it, I told him everything. The laptop notification, the Calgary woman, the dinner at Hawksworth, the bus. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Which hospital, he said. Dad. Which hospital, sweetheart? Vancouver General. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He was there in 17. He came with my stepmother, who brought a bag from our house that had things in it I hadn't known I needed. My good robe, snacks that weren't from a vending machine, a soft blanket for the baby, and a card from Agatha that said, "We're so proud of you, dear," in her looping handwriting, which made me cry again. My father held his granddaughter for the first time, and he didn't say a word for about 2 minutes. He just stood by the window with her, looking at her, and his expression was the same one he'd had in old photos when he held me for the first time. I know because I've seen those photos my whole life. Then he handed her back to me and he said, "What do you need from me?" I thought about it. I thought about what I actually wanted, and what was fair, and what kind of life I wanted to be building for the small person currently squinting at the ceiling. "I need a lawyer," I said. "A good one." My father nodded. "I know someone. What happened next is something I am going to describe carefully, Because I want to be accurate, and because some of it is still in process, legally speaking. My father did not call my husband. He did not show up at Hawksworth and make a scene. He is not that kind of man. The kind of man he is the kind who calls his lawyer on a Friday evening and has a family law specialist lined up by Monday morning. And who makes sure his daughter has somewhere to stay. Not at the West Van House because I didn't want to go backward, but at a furnished apartment my father's company owns in Yaletown, which was empty and ready within 24 hours. I went home from the hospital in my father's car. A town car with a proper infant car seat that his assistant had sourced that same afternoon. My daughter slept the whole way. I sat in the back and held her hand and looked out at the city and felt, for the first time in months, that I was being taken care of. My husband came home that evening to an apartment that was mostly mine. My furniture, my kitchen, my car, which I had arranged to have picked up from the hospital parkade by my father's driver before my husband ever got there. He found a note on the kitchen counter. The note said I had gone to stay with family, and that I would be in touch through a lawyer. I am told, by a mutual friend who told me more than I probably needed to know, that he called my parents home that night. He had found the number through a mutual contact, someone who knew my brother. He spoke to my stepmother, who was polite but brief. She told him I was resting and that he should expect to hear from a lawyer shortly. I'm told he asked whether my father was the Aldridge Group Aldridge. My stepmother said yes. I'm told there was a fairly long silence. He sent a text to my phone that night that said, "Can we please talk?" I didn't realize, and then nothing after the dash. He never sent the rest of it. I don't know if he didn't know how to finish the sentence, or if he understood that finishing it would only make things worse. I didn't reply. The divorce took 8 months. It was not particularly dramatic as divorces go. There was no custody battle because my husband, to his credit, and I mean this, I am trying to be honest, did not try to fight for arrangements that would have been worse for our daughter. We settled on shared custody, with her primary residence with me. He pays child support, which is set by federal guidelines and not negotiable. I kept the car, which was mine to begin with, and the condo which I bought out. I did not take money from him. I did not want his money. I wanted him out of my daily life, and I got that. What I did not expect was how the community around him shifted once people understood who I was. Not because I wanted status, or recognition, or any of that, but because for 2 years I had watched his mother treat me like a decorative inconvenience, and watched his friends' wives be politely condescending about my little job, and watched him accept all of it without saying a word. And then, slowly, as information moved through social circles the way it always does, the tone changed. His mother sent a card. I did not respond. One of his friends' wives texted to say she had always liked me. I did not respond to that either. I'm not interested in being liked by people who needed to know my father's name first. My daughter is 14 months old now. She walks, actually runs, it happened practically overnight, and she says 3 words clearly, more, dog, and something that sounds like up, but she says it as a question, this ascending little sound, which means she wants to be carried, or she sees something interesting, or she has opinions, which she does, constantly at volume. I work 4 days a week now, from home mostly. My father offered me a role at Aldridge Group, something meaningful, not a token position, and I took it after a year of thinking it over. Not because I needed the salary, but because I finally decided I was done performing, not needing things I actually wanted. My husband and I do the handovers at a coffee shop equidistant from our 2 places. It is civil. We don't talk much beyond what concerns our daughter, her sleep schedule, her pediatrician appointments, whether she's cutting another tooth. He remarried, not to the woman from Calgary, to someone else. I don't know anything about her except that my daughter seems to like her, which is what matters. On the day of the first handover, after the divorce was finalized, he said to me, not in an accusatory way, more like someone trying to understand something that genuinely confused him, "Why didn't you ever tell me?" I thought about the question. I thought about all the ways I could answer it. "I wanted to know who you were," I said, without all of that in the way. He nodded slowly. I think he understood. Or he understood as much as he was able to. I put my daughter in her car seat, her good car seat, the one my father researched for 3 days before buying, and I drove home. The Granville Bridge was quiet. The inlet was silver in the late afternoon light. My daughter had fallen asleep before we reached the other side, and I thought, this is mine, this life, this city, this child. I built it, even when it broke, and now I'm building it again. That's enough. That's more than enough.